Awesome.
Yeah. How you doing, man?
Oh man, I'm getting along. How are
Uh,
you?
Pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny just like listening to your podcast, like I don't know, being out of it for a couple of years and not seeing people, it's just like you realize like how much people's lives have been like going on and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've probably mentioned this a few times in the podcast, but that's like kind of why I started this, where I was just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's been so long since I've talked to anybody and I just need to connect, just see what's
Yeah.
going on, And I
Yeah,
was never
totally.
even good at that in the first place. So I was,
Right?
you
Yeah, no,
know,
I feel that. Yeah. Yeah, at cons, all these people and you're like, I don't know, like half-ass scared to go talk to some of them, and stuff like that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure for some strange reason. I guess it's because we're all introverts.
I think yeah, there's probably, uh, I mean, we'll just go ahead and jump right into it if you're cool with
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, totally, man.
Yeah,
I'm
because I do think that's a topic that I've talked about on this podcast too. Just talking to creators and just their creative path and everything that is involved in that, and networking is a big part of that. And the way
yeah,
like networking at comic conventions is different than networking on social media,
yeah.
etc. And
Two
it's
different beasts entirely.
totally, yeah. But I will get out front real quick. So I'm talking to Scott Schmidt, comic book writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep,
independent.
that's
Yeah,
all.
yeah, that's
Yep.
all. Well, you're in good company. If I'll have to double check, but I think you're actually the first comic book writer I've had on this show.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yeah, well, because it's an interesting thing. The comic book writer, the independent comic book writer, is kind of a weird position to be in.
Oh
It's
yeah.
because it's like, uh, in many ways, it's the least glamorous part of the indie comic creation process,
Yeah.
but it's also kind of the only one that gets anything done. Because like, if it weren't for comic book writers trying to self publish and fund their own books, all these artists, I'm sorry, would not be doing anything, and they wouldn't be
Right.
drawing anything, and they wouldn't be making any money. And I don't
Yeah.
mean to exactly sound so harsh there, but there's an aspect of that to that.
No. I think that's absolutely true. Like
Yeah.
I it's the whole idea that it's kind of a I don't know, not talked about just how like the financial strain of a comic book is like squarely on the writer, at least
Yeah.
like in the way that we do it now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like
I think that's been alleviated a little bit with the prevalence of like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and etc.
yeah,
But
for sure.
like, we both started kind of before that was a thing, and
Yeah.
the general attitude was like, well, if you want to write a comic book, you got to pay somebody to draw it, otherwise they're
Yeah.
not going to draw it, which made sense. Like, I get it.
Right. No.
But
Totally.
it also makes sense in a market where you can make money back on selling the book, which
Very true.
is not always the case.
Yeah. No. I mean, not ever the case in my opinion.
Right. But it's also an interesting thing I've noticed. Just talking about networking and going to comic conventions, which was a thing that people used to do before 2020.
Way back when.
Right. But like, my network of people that I've connected with, they're mostly all artists, because I'm a
Yeah.
writer. So what do I
Same.
got to do to talk to another writer for? You're just trying to work with another artist that I might try to work with. And,
Right.
like, we've got no reason to collaborate on anything.
Right.
So you're actually the first like strictly independent comic book writer that I've really gotten a chance to speak to, because most of the people in my network, as I say, are artists, or at least writer artists, in some fashion.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Like almost everybody that I like hang out with, like, at cons and stuff, is an artist. Like it's there's a few writers, but like it's just like you said, it's dominated by artists, because that's who you're out there to talk to.
because that's what makes it a comic book, is the artist.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I don't know, just thinking about that dynamic, because like, I kind of came up and was inspired to like really get into comics in the early 2000s, when there was that big I would call it a comic book revival, really, because it was after
Mm-hmm.
Marvel had gone bankrupt and the 90s bubble burst, and
Right.
everybody, I specifically remember that down period where it was like comics are done, like nobody likes comics
Right.
anymore, like Marvel's making garbage, they're bankrupt, DC killed Superman, and now
Right.
they've got like a red and blue version. This is garbage. And then like a few years later, you have Marvel come out with their Ultimate Comics line, and
Yeah.
they're like Grant Morrison's doing the X-Men, and it's all like you had these big names, Grant Morrison and Warren Ellis and Bendis, Brian Michael Bendis, and all these like
Right.
indie guys that were revitalizing the medium, and they were all writers. It wasn't artists, and it was a total like complete backlash from the 90s glut of just artists, the Image guys.
Right. The Image guys just cranking out their own books. Yeah.
Right. And so I kind of saw that, and I was like, hey, maybe I can do that, and I was not forward thinking enough to think by the time I'm ready to do that, the industry will swing back away from that, and now nobody cares about comic book writers anymore.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely like a sort of I don't know, a backlash against writers, I think. Like, like, and I'm one of those guys who, like, I completely understand every argument when it comes down to like the work that the artist does. I mean,
sure. Yeah.
And I understand, that like that's first and foremost, that's who you got to take care of and stuff. But like, there was just like, it's been a few years now, but it's just always like, oh, artists never get like, their name should be first on books, and like stuff like stuff like that, where it just felt like, like writers were kind of getting ganged up on a little bit.
Yeah. I remember this. I just thought this was like kind of the perfect picture of the whole situation, which was I don't remember which indie creator made it, but it's been a few years now at this point, 5 years at least. But somebody did a Kickstarter for just a T-shirt that just had the text on it that said, "Sorry, I'm just the writer."
Oh, nice.
And it was something that you could wear at a convention when you're selling your book, and you could just be like, "No, I'm just the writer," because I'm sure you've experienced that working at a convention, and you're trying to sell books, and people like, "Oh, how long does it take you to draw this?" And you're like, "Oh, no, I don't draw it. I just write it."
Right.
Like, oh, nice.
Okay. And that's when the point you can just seem to like move on.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I remember there was a little bit in the news. The comic book news, not the real news. in like the comic book news, and I don't remember which artist it was, but it was somebody working at Marvel that was loudly complaining that they weren't invited to the writers' retreat. And they were like, I'm a creator. I've got ideas on how to do this. Why are they just inviting all the writers to figure this out? I'm more important than them. And I thought that was like the perfect picture where like the pro artist working at Marvel is complaining that he's not being respected as a writer. And on an indie level, the writers are complaining because they're not the artists, and nobody cares about them. And I was just like, man, comic books. Yeah.
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so before we get too much into just complaining about comic book artists,
I hear that.
I'm sure we got plenty of stories, but why don't you tell me a little bit about just your history getting into comic books? Like, when did you decide to make that life-altering decision to write and publish a comic book? Like, what drove you to that?
It's funny because like watching several of your shows and stuff, I was like, oh man, I started thinking about myself, and I like couldn't remember the years, and like so I had to like backtrack and think about all the stuff. So so I'm prepared. I like remember now like how the timeline sort of works.
I like this. You're a guest who's done his research.
So I guess technically it's easiest to base it off my first publishing credit. So that would be this guy.
Okay.
It is Something Wicked by Future Quake Press. It's a UK publication, and that came out in 2012.
Okay.
So I would say that probably 2 years prior to that, like, is when I kind of like jumped in and like sort of was like working towards what that story became. Going from like, oh, comics are pretty sweet, and I think I could probably like out of all the weird stories I have in my head, like comics seems to be the place that I could probably tell those and get away with it. So like, took about 2 years to like, get your arsenal together, figuring out how scripts work and where the hell to go, like to find artists and stuff like that. So So about 2012 is like when I kind of track it back, or 2010, I guess.
It was a new decade.
Right. Yeah.
In many ways.
I guess it had, which is funny because this is like most people I think in comics generally is like, that read comics as a kid and then like in college like they came back to comics.
Yeah, yeah. That was my path. Like in high school, I was like, comics suck. I'm done.
Yeah. Comics. I didn't read a single comic in high school.
Right. I got into rock music and punk rock, and I learned how to play the guitar in high school because that's cool. Yeah. Comic books are boring. And then eventually I got back into it, and I was just like, oh, comics are pretty cool now.
Yeah. So yeah, I was like in college, and it's funny because like it wasn't because like I stumbled across any comics. Some dude who I was like friends with in college, like he had a comic book. He had a trade of 30 Days of Night.
Oh, and yeah.
So like that was the first comic that I read that wasn't a superhero comic, So like it was like the first thing, and that was like, whoa, this is wild. This is a horror movie as a comic. I've never like seen something like that. So like that just like put comics on my radar. And actually that was probably like 2008 or 2006 or something like that.
Yeah.
So like they like came back into my consciousness, but then like it wasn't until like I saw I like naturally people history and stuff. So I dropped out of college, and then I went to college again at another place like 2 years later.
Yeah.
Been
there.
Yeah. So I went back to school to finish my creative writing degree, and the new school that I went to, there was a little tiny comic shop like a block away from the campus. So like, I just walked in one day, like just, kicking around because I was waiting between classes, and it's like, oh man, there's some cool stuff in here. So like that was about the time I think Hellboy was like in trade number 3 maybe. Like it wasn't like far along, and it wasn't like the movie wasn't out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He wasn't as big in people's like consciousness as he is now. There was a lot of Goon.
I do remember that. Yeah, I do remember Goon kind of being like held up as like this new great indie comic thing.
Yeah, like and for the most part, like it and Hellboy, like when they were concurrent.
Yeah, they were like the two big Dark Horse.
Yeah,
books.
They were totally on par, like quality.
Yep, and just popularity too. You know? Like Hellboy sort of lasted out over time because of the movies, and and Mignola's just. He's Mignola and just kind of keeps it going. But no, I know I do remember that. Like those two books were kind of like equal pedestals of pedigree.
And what's funny is like a branch off from that is like just thinking about like my influences and stuff as a writer. I actually think I lean more Goon. Like I think I would pick up a Goon comic before I would a Hellboy, just because I don't know. There's some things that Eric Powell does that like I don't know. I just really get a kick out of, and there's a little bit more of like. It's a better style, or I guess a more fitting style of humor for me than I think Hellboy humor, which is really kind of just like dry and schlocky. But
there's like a cheesiness to Hellboy. Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that comic shop that I went back to, like it just I found all these cool books, and I guess the thing that actually started now to finally get around to your question is like. Picked up The Damned by Cullen Bunn and Brian Hurt. And so it was like, it's an amazing book. It's still one of my favorite books after all these years. And, so I loved it and everything. And it wasn't until like, I don't know, the 3rd or 4th issue that I found out that they were, in St. Louis at the time while they were doing that book. And, that blew my mind. I was like, what? Like, I kind of thought you had to like live in New York to do comics,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like, I thought you had to like be able to go to the office and.
Right. I had the same thing, where, it's because you read about this, like the 60s and 70s when all this was happening. And it's like, they lived in New York. They went to the office every day to work. And like Jack Kirby would go to the office to draw comics. And it's such a like, well, that's far away. I'll never do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that I was like, oh man, like maybe I could do this. That's interesting. And then not too long after, I found out that Cullen was going to be at a show in Springfield called Vision Con. And so I went and I met him. He was the nicest dude in the world. Like I was one of those guys.
Yeah, he really is one of the nicest guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I was one of those guys that day who probably stood at his table for like, a few hours too long. But,
asking
he
questions.
was, yeah, and
he's very generous with his time. I was the same way. Like when I think the first, if not the first, the second convention I went to, he was there, and he was like one of the guys that I wanted to talk to, and he just he stood there. He was very polite and excited that I was interested in comics, and he wanted to talk shop with me, and he gave me all of his time, and I asked him a million questions. It was like, how do you, it's like, what's the best way to do this? How do you do, and he's great. Yeah. Very open. Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah. Like that day we just talked, and like, he said he would email me some scripts, kind of like show me some stuff. And he did 2 days later, which is like crazy, right? Like the fact that he like went back after the fact and did it, that's nuts. Yeah. So like from there, he also told me about the Future Quake Press, and like one of the things that they do. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't. No, I'm not familiar. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Future Quake. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, okay. I am familiar with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's just like their horror little imprint, I think, that they do. But he told me about that, how they pair up a writer and artist, like, so you don't have to do anything. So that's like
very nice.
Yeah. Hello. Okay. That's the missing link, like the missing link between like you're working on comics, but you've got no art, so
right.
So that was awesome. Like he just put me down the path, and that's after that publishing thing, like, I haven't stopped. So
nice. Yeah. So what, so that was the Future Quake was like your first publication.
Yeah.
How much have you done? Like, are you, I know, okay, so I'll just get this out of the way. I know you're working on your book, Northern Steele.
Yep.
Which the 2 issues that I have were called Steele Versus.
Yep.
Which is something we could talk about. But are you, I have a lot of unfinished projects because I'm stupid. And I'm like, I'm going to start 5 books at the same time, and then maybe I'll finish one of them.
Right.
Are you somebody who's just able to focus on like your one thing, or have you had like a lot of like start and stops?
Oh man, yeah. Like I'm a fucking mascot for the stop and start.
Well,
I'm
just really glad to hear that I'm not the only one, because it was giving me a lot of anxiety for a while.
Yeah, no, and it's so true. Like, and to be fair, like you don't necessarily control those stops and starts either.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's not just a simple, oh, I'm out of money, I can't pay for it. Like it's things like, oh, well, I don't have the time for your book anymore. So like,
I've talked about this before, but I'm always surprised at the artists that will quit a paying job.
Yeah.
And it's not even because like a better paying job came along. There's just a variety of reasons where they're like, I can't or don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. And some of them are perfectly legitimate reasons. I've had artists quit on me because they just said, look, I got a day job and I've just had a kid and I want to spend time with my family.
Yeah.
Who am I to argue with that?
Right.
And then I've had other artists that are just like, it's just not working. I don't want to do it anymore. And they're not doing anything else. And it's just like, okay, I mean, I'm sorry, but sucks.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
No, I've, so I guess total, I've got 3 series that are like in some form, like where at least the first issue is done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So Northern Steele would be my farthest along. The first 2 issues are complete, and then the line art for the 3rd issue is complete, and then we're almost done with the line art for the 4th. So
nice.
So I'm almost 4 issues into that. I'm almost to a trade with it. So
that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's the fucking magical key, that unlocks like so many things, like.
Well, just talking from a production level, that's where the price point,
right,
like really breaks.
Yeah, that's when you can actually start to make money instead of lose money at every
instead of
place
lose
you go.
money. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't have to mince words. It's losing money.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I've done nothing but lose money since I started comics.
I can't think of an indie comic writer that I know that hasn't lost money. Even artists I know that are losing money doing what they do. It's tough.
Yeah.
So still, Northern Steele, that's the one that you've been doing the longest.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I do, like I said, I have 2 issues, issue 0 and issue 1, which I mean, when did those come out? 15 or 14? I'm trying to remember when I would have got these from you, because it would have been several years ago at this point.
Yeah, so 2014 was the Kickstarter that those books probably came from.
Okay.
Maybe I don't know if you backed or not, but if not, that was when I also had like, you know, extras from that Kickstarter, and that's what I was selling at cons for those two.
Yeah.
So.
I think I got them from you at a convention, like a Planet Comic Con in Kansas City or something like
probably.
That. Yeah.
So yeah, those. Sorry, what was the question?
I was just asking when they first came out.
Oh yeah, 2014. That's right. Yeah. So, actually funded the first one out of my pocket, pitched it around, it didn't go anywhere, and then in 2014, that's when I did the Kickstarter and just went ahead with the issue 1, the next one. So one was finished and one was kickstarted.
So the second one the one that you did through Kickstarter, were you able to fund the whole thing through Kickstarter, like cover the art costs? Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I was super lucky because like by that time, like it's crazy to think about it. And tell me what you think about it. But I can't make a book now for what I could make a book back in 2014.
Yeah.
Just like the people hiring people and, you know, just kind of rates for every step. Like I used to be able to get like, I don't know, $5-7 for a lettered page.
Yeah.
And like, man, I'm lucky to snag like 15, like, you know, like 15 is kind of the base level now. You know? Like,
now prices have pretty much doubled since then.
Yeah.
You know, across the board. Yeah.
Across the board. Yeah. So
I'm very fortunate that most of the guys that I still work with, I have a good working relationship. And so they really try to cut me as many deals as they can, because they're still making money somewhere else. And to be perfectly frank, you know, the market, there's not, if you want to like actually make a comic book, unless you're one of the 0.01% of people that can just send samples to Dark Horse and they go, wow, you're perfect, we were going to put you on a book immediately. Unless you're in that group, you're probably not making a book.
Yeah.
You know, like it's really difficult to come across like an indie. Well, first of all, I think it's really difficult to come across an indie publisher or writer that's actually going to get a book made. Yeah. Because that's a whole process in and of itself. So
yeah, man.
I do think that I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I do think that somebody that can just like get it done and has like a history of just, you know, like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the book made. Right. That has a lot of value on the indie scene, you know, and it goes a long way with a lot of artists, but you are correct. Like rates definitely have, it's not just that they've gone up. I think the landscape has changed a little bit, probably partially because of Kickstarter. Yeah. Because there is just like an easier path to market. Because like I know I was getting into indie comics. I always feel like I'm always been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Like in my entire life. Yeah. So it's like when I got into comics, everybody is like, hire an artist, pay them out of pocket, and then submit your book to Diamond, get it into comic book shops, and you make all your money back. And then I started doing that, and then Diamond immediately, it's like, okay, we're no longer accepting books that order below this level. And it wasn't just like indies that were losing out on that. There was like legitimate small press publishers that were like, well, we're not selling books at that level, so we're no longer going through Diamond. Right. And now here we are 10 years later, and Marvel and DC have both pulled out of Diamond. So Diamond has been like a losing strategy, I feel, for a long time now.
But, I hate it. Like I hate the system of ordering comic books. Like it's funny. I feel like a very untraditional writer, and I feel like an untraditional comic book maker, and I feel like also a very untraditional comic book reader, because like I don't have a shop, I don't have a pull list, and like it's not that I haven't before, but like I've just gotten so tired of how that model works that it's more of a hassle for me to do it. Like
same.
like ordering through Diamond, like a Diamond code, like all that stuff is just like a cutoff date. What?
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah, it's awful.
So,
yeah,
and like it's set up to fail.
Yeah,
so.
it really does seem like the most antiquated system. It probably made sense in the 80s when everybody was making more money off the newsstands.
Yeah.
And Diamond was like, hey, we can just like sell direct to comic book shops and we can do specialty items that you're not going to get on the newsstand. Yeah. That makes sense. You want to get your Ninja Turtles, you got to go through Diamond because that's not sold at the supermarket.
Right.
But now nothing is sold at the supermarket and it's only sold through Diamond and it doesn't make sense anymore.
Right.
You know. No. So when I was kind of getting into it and doing my own research and figuring out how to do this, the conventional wisdom was Diamond, and Kickstarter wasn't a thing.
No,
and so it's like by the time I was ready to try and get into it, Diamond was dead, but Kickstarter wasn't quite the stalwart thing that it is now. You know,
there weren't 200 comic book projects going on at once.
Exactly. Yeah. But so it's like, once again, I'm now this year, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to give Kickstarter a legitimate chance to try and fund a book. Here I am like 10 years after they've started. Because I have done a few Kickstarters, but it was only to fund printing of trade paperbacks after the books had already been fully funded. Right. And this year will be the first time that I try to fully fund a book through Kickstarter, you know. Which is a whole project.
Right. It's funny because like I'm working the exact opposite way. Like I've done full funds and then like take months and months to have to fulfill, and that process, like it's always been such a task, especially like as the writer. Mm-hmm. Like, man, like honestly, before the Kickstarter even started, my job's done, right? So
yeah,
I mean, usually,
right. Yeah.
So like then you just basically have to like babysit this project all the way until it's done, and like that's the normal process. But with the Kickstarter, then you've got an audience behind you, you know, who's, you know, you have their money.
Yeah, they're waiting.
Yeah, so it's like it's such a different experience to make a comic book that way than like, you know, when you're just doing it. So yeah, I'm my next one, I'm gonna try to have everything done so that I can just do printing. So
yeah. I've gone that route too. I honestly can't say which one I prefer because I mean, I assume most people are like this, but I have the problem. One of my biggest problems with producing, writing, and then self-publishing comics is that by the time everything is written and then the art starts, I'm already sick of the book. And then, like you said, I got to babysit it through the production of the art. So then by the time the art is done and the book is lettered and ready to sell, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Like, I'm tired of looking at this thing. I'm ready to move on to the next project. And now I've got to be Mr. Stan Lee salesman, you know, to try and push this book on people. And I mean, I respect to Stan Lee. Like, it takes a certain person to be able to do that. And anything you can say about it, he definitely pulled that out in spades. So it's difficult for me. I think it's difficult for a lot of creators.
I think so too, and I think it's interesting. I think there are two people when it comes to that. There are people that like do and can sell their books, and then there's people who don't or can't sell their books, you know, and like, or just choose not to because they're, you know, like, I don't know, your heart's not in it. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I think it's I feel so stupid sometimes. Like I'm wasting my time because like, I'm always excited to go to a con, right? But then like get to a con, I set up and I got all my books and like I more or less just watch people walk by.
Yeah.
Like, that's just kind of because I don't have a pad to draw on, you know, because I'm not an artist. And because of that, like I have to stare at people.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there smiling.
Yeah. And like you just look, I feel like I look pathetic, you know.
Yeah.
So
I totally know that. I'm so envious of artists because it's like I've heard artists complain. They're like, I just can't get enough done because people are always coming up to me and interrupting me while I'm drawing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's the kind of problem you want to have, though.
Right.
Because I do think that there's something to an artist sitting there drawing that makes them more approachable because people want to see art being produced.
Yeah.
But, like, there's nothing to see when a writer says, you know, I spent the last 3 months writing this. Here it is. Read it. And they go, well, I don't want to read it. I just want to see art. And I'm like,
right.
oh, well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, I think that to a certain degree, like most people realize when they're kind of getting to a writer booth, that the first thing they're going to get is a sales pitch, right? The first thing they're going to get a plot, and they're like, oh, this is a mashup of this and this, like, and like, I don't know, just I think
I'm so bad about that too.
Yeah, I just like I think the last show I took my Nintendo Switch, and I think that I just said, I think I just played like most of the time. People would come up, I'd like put it down and be like, hey, what's up, man? Like,
yeah.
But like I didn't bother to sit there and look at people in the aisles and just hi. I was just like, I'm over it. So.
I usually try to so obviously before 2020 came and just like changed the whole landscape.
Yeah.
I was definitely in like a weird space when I was going to cons where I don't know, I don't want to say I'd given up because that sounds too defeatist, but I reached a point of like total just ambivalence and a certain amount of apathy. I won't say total apathy, but where I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to be behind my table. I want to go out and get books and see people. And I'm just like,
totally.
I'm like, I don't care if anybody buys anything from me. I don't care if they take the book off the table. Like, obviously I don't want them to steal from me, but like
nobody's more shit I got to carry home.
Exactly. It's just like, what do I even care? Like and I'm sure you'll understand this. It's like, I also kind of get to that point where I'm like, even if I sell it, I'm not really making money off of it.
No.
I spent, you look at a 32-page comic book, you might spend like $5,000 on that. Mm-hmm. What are you going to make if you sell 10 copies for $5 each? It's nothing, Nothing. So it's like, I don't even care about selling stuff. I give them away. I actually think it's more valuable to just go around tables and meet other creators and just give them the book, Mm-hmm. But then you kind of get to the point where you're like, why do I even have a table? Why don't I just go to the con and just have fun? You
just put them in a bag and just fling them out everywhere.
Hand them out to people. I don't know. That was the space I was in 2019. Yeah. And it was probably the most I had enjoyed a convention in a long time when I was just kind of like, I'm just here to have fun. I didn't even try to sell.
I think the last one that I went to, I think it was a Planet Comic-Con. Yeah, I did that, man. I was just like, I'm going to go talk to this person. Like, I'm going to go buy some stuff. Yeah. Because, like, I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually, like, went and looked for some cheap trades, or, like, actually went and bought some comics, or bought anything at a convention, And so, yeah, I was definitely over it. I think, in a way, or I hope, but whenever I get back to it, which probably won't be until like 2020 to actually go to or 2022 for
22. Yeah.
Like, hopefully it's just a little different, and everybody's kind of got like a reset.
I am kind of hoping we'll see what happens. Cause here we are in the middle of 2021 and still kind of, nothing's really open-ish. Right. This places are open, but like Planet Comic-Con was supposed to be in spring, and now it got pushed back to August. And we'll see what attendance is like for that. It's not going to be until 2022 when things are back on like the schedules that they were before.
Right. Yeah. That there's really, we're past the point of consideration of the pandemic.
Correct. Yeah.
Then like that it's just completely 100% on the individual if they want to take precautions.
Yeah.
Which I think I honestly, every day I go out, like, I see that just like gradually getting there, just like a little less masks at the stores every day. So,
Yep. But, well, I don't want to have too much of a depressing writer's gripe session.
No, they're good. They're therapeutic.
I think well, not only are they therapeutic, because like I said, it's not often that a comic book writer gets to talk to another comic book writer.
Yeah.
So it's like when they meet up, it's all the same. You just got to get it off my chest.
Right.
Get it out there. I also do think that that's important for people to hear. Like people that are interested in comics, because there's always that sugarcoating that kind of comes across the whole. Like, I remember when I was getting into it, everybody is like, like, don't get into comics for the money, and I'm like, okay, I won't, because I love comics,
Yeah.
And you're like, you're going into it like, I'm not in it for the money, and then you don't really realize what that actually means until you put in 10s, 20
Right.
thousands of dollars into these books and you made $50. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's what they meant. You
Right.
don't expect to make money, expect to lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
There's a difference. You know, I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I don't care if I don't make money as long as they pay for themselves. That's
Right.
great. And then now here I'm still, you know, over 10 years later, I'm like really
Yeah.
hoping this one's going to pay for itself.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, like, I think that it makes me a little sick each time I get in books when I'm like, oh man, you know, how long are those going to be there? Like, I mean, I've got stacks from like, I think every, you know, like every thing that I've done just through like comp copies and like extras that were ordered, and just, you know, I probably got, you know, several copies of everything I've ever been in, just because, you know, it's so hard to sell, man. It's so hard to get rid of all that stuff.
Yep, I got boxes and boxes of stuff.
Yeah.
But so let's talk a little bit about your book, Northern Steele.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've got a question. You're from Kansas City, right?
I am from Columbia, Missouri.
Oh, okay. But you're from Missouri. All right.
Yes, I am from Missouri.
So your book is about a Canadian Mountie.
Yeah.
Does this qualify as cultural appropriation?
Man, that's a good question.
You know, when I first read
if it is, I think the Canadians will let it slide.
I was going to say, if there was anybody you could probably get away with appropriating their culture, it's the Canadians, because what are they going to do? Like, they're too polite. They're just, you know.
Yeah.
I do remember first seeing this, and I was like, that was my thought. I mean, no offense. You got the nice, beautiful beard. And I was like, oh, he must be from Canada. It's a book about a Mountie. You know, you got a lumberjack look to you.
Yeah.
And no, just I mean, to be fair, I'm from St. Louis, so I've seen plenty of Missouri folk that are rocking the big beard look. So you're not out of place. But
yeah.
But anyway, joke aside. Joke aside, where does the inspiration for Northern Steele come from?
It's one of those like weird, like, you know, you're looking for this and then you find this sort of thing. Like, so I guess probably my biggest creative influence, or my first major one, was Jack London. So like his short stories, you know, I grew up reading them, and then I like got back to him as a writer in college. And like read some of his longer novels and stuff like that. So like he was actually at the Klondike Gold Rush, and that's where a lot of his material came from. So knowing that, I picked up this random book at Barnes and Noble, something Klondike Gold Rush, it's around here somewhere. You know, but it was just like a historical account of the Gold Rush from somebody who was there. So I was like, sure, I'll pick it up, I'll check it out. And that's where I found Sam Steele's name. And it was around this time that I was just like, I don't know, I was probably like 4 or 5 short stories in of creating comics. You know, I was kind of on a really like good streak of just like getting an idea, writing a script, finding an artist, knocking out a 5-page short, you know, like, you know, not really looking to publish it, just writing and making them.
Yeah.
And so like I came across his name, and that he was a Mountie. I was just like, holy shit, that just writes itself, doesn't it? Like,
I mean, it's a great name. Like,
yeah. So, you know, he was a real guy. And then like, you know, I think at the point where I got to where I was done doing short stories, I got a gnat flying around. I'm like,
it happens.
But at the time where short stories were kind of like I was done and wanted to try something like, you know, more long form and do a series, like I was just like looking around, and I was like, just like, I don't know, he just kept coming back to this idea of this Mountie, you know, and how to make a comic book out of him. Like, and at that time, like, monster fighting was like it. Like,
I was gonna say, you're talking about like being into Hellboy.
Yeah,
and I think that's a very direct influence on this.
Right. Yeah. Like the you know, especially in these two, it's really like you know, sort of one-on-one, like you know, it's not like hordes of stuff and things like that.
It's like a cryptid kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah. So like, you know, that was kind of the first direction that I took it. So from there, it just kind of like snowballed into like researching him. And I'm a pretty big history guy, so like I wanted to also include the history because there's so much awesome stuff that he did in real life that is like worthy of a comic book in itself. Right. I just wanted to include that cool stuff with, you know, the reason you buy a comic book, which is like punching and monsters and stuff.
And zombies and
right. So But yeah, that's pretty much where it came from.
Oh, that's
So.
cool. I like it. Like talking a little bit about the name, because like the first issues, I know
Yeah.
it was called Steele Versus.
Yep.
And I I understand totally why you changed the name.
Yeah.
But I always liked the. I will say I maybe it's a little too intellectual, but like I get it. Like it's like a because I love the idea of it as in a classic monthly comic book format of like
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
issue is a new story and a new villain or monster or what
Right.
have you, you know, so it just makes sense. But I can understand why it's a little confusing, especially when we're in the era beyond like a standard monthly comic book, you know, like
Yeah.
everything now is like trade
Definitely.
paperbacks.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Or a mini series, you
or
know.
yeah, it's a mini series. Yeah, there's like the whole concept of like a long form comic book series is
It's
itself,
dead. It's
it's
gone.
dead. Yeah, it's such an old idea.
Yeah. You know what's
like
funny? Like,
yeah.
I saw the other day. It's a comic I really dig, but I've fallen off all like current comics.
Mm-hmm.
Is shit.
Hmm.
Manifest Destiny from
Okay.
Image.
Okay,
I don't know if
I
you've
haven't
ever
read
read
it.
it.
No.
It's that same bent. It's a lot smarter than my book though. It's Lewis and Clark expedition in like
Okay,
a
yes,
really weird, twisted version of the
I've heard some
American
stuff
frontier.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's cool. But like I looked in just randomly the other day, and it's on like issue 41 or something, and I'm like,
yeah.
holy shit, 41 issues? That's insane to do right now, you know?
Mm-hmm. And there's I mean there's a few series that are making it work, but they're in that sweet spot of
Right.
kind of like the legacy publishers, you know, like like Image or Dark Horse is
right.
one of the few places where you're going to be able to make that work. And in order to get in there is a whole process in and of itself, almost nigh impossible, you know.
Yeah.
To be able to do that, and then even then the people that are making books for them to be able to have a well enough selling series to get to 40 is also nigh impossible, you know,
because like there's that cardinal rule which I learned probably 4 or 5 years ago. It was just like it's like statistically proven, like just your readership as it falls off per issue, you know, until you get to that point, you know, where you're dedicated readers and you really don't gain anybody until the trade. So
right, yeah,
that's just crazy. But
well, it's funny. I'm just talking about the name change because I just have to assume Northern Steel just has a little bit more pop to it, a little more zing to it, less confusing. Go ahead.
Well, there's so an interesting change behind that was that basically I pitched to several publishers and it's been rejected by everyone. More so, it's just been not acknowledged, you know, because they never call you back.
Well, that was my follow-up question: was did you get any actual rejections, or did you just hear nothing?
No, so I got an actual rejection from Alterna Press.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And like this was kind of before they, I guess, become somewhat affiliated with Comicsgate. I don't know. I don't really, but
I can't actually speak to that in any way. I sort of know. I know Alterna. What's his name? Peter Simeti. Peter Simeti. Yeah. I know. I got some friends who've got stuff published through Alterna, and I've got some friends who specifically stopped publishing their stuff with Alterna. I know it. I really have nothing to say on it. And it's not because I'm trying to not take a position. I literally just am not in any network. Like I don't know anybody. I don't know nothing.
Same. Like I just like I was just referencing it to say that I'm aware of something, but I know enough to know nothing. So
exactly.
There we go.
Same. Yeah.
But
you and we're not so different.
So I pitched it to him, and he was the only one I've actually received feedback from, which was kind of nice. But
that's
one of the things I mean, like he gave me notes and everything, and told me to make these changes and resubmit it. I never did, but one of the things he said was that the title needed to change, and you know he listed some reasons and stuff, and I was like, you know, like I get it. It's kind of annoying to say to people at cons, like because like there's always sort of an explanation. So yeah, that's basically it. It was just clunky.
I get that,
and it really served the, like you said, that purpose of like a on the stands, like, you know, get it this month, versus, you know, just being a good solid book title. So
yeah. Well,
So
it's
yeah,
funny bringing it up because I'm sure you know Jordan Krager,
yeah,
and he's got his new book that's
yeah,
on Kickstarter right now called Tiger Boy Versus,
yeah.
and it's the same concept. Each
Right. Yeah.
issue he fights a different villain, and I did a podcast with him, a few episodes ago, and
Mm-hmm.
I bit my tongue. I didn't want to bring up because it's like I like his book, and I actually do like the concept for the title, but
Yeah.
I wanted to be like, yeah, Scott Schmidt, he had a book called Steele Versus, but he changed the title because it wasn't good. How do you feel about your book, Tiger Boy Versus? Is that okay? I didn't want to go down that road because
Right.
I love Jordan, and I legitimately do like the title, but
Yeah. No. No. It works. It works better. Like for his like the title, like it paints a better picture. Like Steele's pretty ambiguous in what it's actually referencing. Like you wouldn't hear Steele and just automatically think, oh, the Canadian Mountie.
Right. No, that's actually a better point because Tiger Boy Versus makes sense.
Yeah.
You hear Tiger Boy, you think of a superhero or a something,
Yep.
like a gladiator or whatever.
And it's not too far off of what you thought of,
Yeah. But you're correct. Steele is a little more ambiguous.
Yeah.
And so, I get it. Makes sense.
But I will say it was terrifying. I probably contemplated the decision for a year or so more because I was like, tossing it back and forth, like recognizability. It had a good Kickstarter, I'd already sold the book too with that title. So there was this part of me that felt like, as someone who is selling things to people, to not give them some to change the title and the logo and the cover and all that stuff in the middle of it feels like a slap in the face.
Man, I get so much anxiety over that. Like my Zero's Heroes trade paperbacks, I can't stand that the spine design is like the numbers are kind of different. I just changed my mind at some point. It's like volume 1 numerical, and then at another point it's slightly different. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot stand that they're different. It drives me insane.
Yeah, exactly.
I totally get that.
There was that feeling, and I sent out a poll to my Kickstarter backs, what do you guys think? If you like it, I was like, I can maybe print a small run of the people who like the original title, and just
trying to appease everybody.
Yeah, and then one day I was just like, fuck it, dude. It's a better title. Just get a new logo, do it. If whoever likes it.
Do you still have copies of the old issues with the old title that you sell at conventions?
I just ran out. I'd gotten to the point where I was doing just basically mailing them out for free, just to because I had 6 or 7 left. So
because I get anxiety over that too. Because this last year I changed my self-publishing company. Because I used to be under New Haven Comics, and
that's right.
I got a new thing called Second Thought Comics, and I did Zero's Heroes Volume 3 under the Second Thought Comics name, and it again drives me insane that I still got copies of the first 2 trade paperbacks under New Haven Comics, and they got it's on the title page. It's check out the website, and it's a dead link.
Right.
Well, it does. It's not. It redirects, but still, it's just. But
still, it's not perfect.
It's not perfect, and that will haunt me to my grave.
Oh yeah, no. I have so many goofy little things like that. Yeah, I do the same thing on my book, Final Street. There's a QR code in the front to play chiptune soundtrack, when you read with the book along with it. And I found out a couple of weeks ago that you had to buy those, it only lasted for a certain amount of time. You actually had to buy the QR code to keep it live, and I didn't know that. So I just feel stupid because there's this QR code that takes you to nothing in this book. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about Final Street. I did not properly prepare for this interview. I got my 2 copies of Steele Versus, but I left my copy of the first issue of Final Street somewhere. I got a shelf just with piles of indie books on it.
Oh yeah.
But that's that book that you do with Brian Atkins. I only have the first issue. How has that book been going for you guys? What have you done since then?
So that's the series that I have the least far along. We got 2 issues. We did Kickstarter for the second issue 2019, 2019, 18, I don't know,
Okay,
something
not
like
too
that.
long ago. I
Right,
mean,
no.
in the grand scheme of things,
Right, yeah. It
it's
was a couple
also
of years ago.
it's embarrassing to think of like 2019 was like 2 years ago, and
Right. And
where
I
did
have
all
no
this time go?
recollection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, so we did 2 issues, and we've, you know, like stops and starts, you know, like
Yeah.
it all comes back to it. And Steele has had its, you know, ups and downs, and, you know, it's going strong now, and like Final Street's the same way. Like, so, I mean, if I can just like kind of devolve into like what it's like, you know, like,
Sure. Yeah.
because we had it with a publisher, Devil's Due.
So that was what I was going to ask, because I thought you guys got picked. You did the Kickstarter first, and then
we did the Kickstarter first, and then we got picked up. And
Okay.
And then, you know, it's
you don't have to dish. You don't have to spill any dirt. That's fine.
Yeah, but like it's funny, like that idea though is like that's such a part of creating comics. Like maybe it's not for everybody else, but it seems like my comics, like everything I go through, there's like, you know, some trials and tribulations of you know, it's just never been just like easy the whole way through, you know.
Right.
So
right.
So it feels like when you talk about the comic, at least as a writer, like, you know, that's a part of it. And like,
yeah, and it's
so
difficult.
to talk about it.
It's so difficult because I know, you know, like if you're trying to talk to like the average person, like, what do? You don't want to just like spill all this negative attitude.
Right.
That's just the natural creative process. Just
all the negative
stuff.
Yeah.
It's like you want to be positive about it, but I know, man. Like,
yeah. Because like the positive thing for Final Street is that, like, you know, we did the first issue. It was really fun. You know, it's a really fun book. We got the second issue funded. We did that. We had a publisher for one of those books, and it was in Diamond for, you know, a month.
And then,
you know, stuff. And then, you know, but the negative is that like after that, it took us like a year and a half to do that Kickstarter and finish it up. And the book was like late, so any momentum that we had with Diamond was dead.
Yeah.
So the second book came out just before we basically severed ties with the publisher, because we didn't know when it was actually going to come out. So we felt stupid to have a book with them that was never going to come out.
Yeah.
So, and at this point, like now, like the series might get done later. It might not. Like, you just don't know. So like,
I hear you. So I'm curious what your perspective is on this as another writer, because like I go back and forth when it comes to kickstarting comics, because like I, as a reader, like on a personal level, I really do prefer reading graphic novels than issues. I stopped collecting issues. It coincidentally was around the same time that I started producing my own comics. Yeah. But it was partially because I could see where the trend was going, where I was like, I'm not going to spend $5 a month for part one of a 6-issue trade paperback. I'll just you know, spend $15 for the trade paperback. And
and I can wait for it. Like,
and I can wait for it because I'm not in a hurry to read it. Like, you know, if it's good, it'll be worth reading in 6 months. You know, you know. And that also sort of had this creative control where I found there was a lot of stuff, and I'm speaking strictly from like as a Marvel and DC and Image and Dark Horse reader, where I was like, I don't need to get this monthly. In 6 months, I'll hear if it's still good and worth reading, and then I'll get it for cheaper. Right. You know, so I was like, I kind of severed ties with the monthly, because I was a guy for many, many years, almost a decade after I got back into comics. I was into comics as a kid, and then, you know, and I would go to the comic book store. I was a monthly. I mean, it's actually drives me crazy to think of how much money I was spending on monthly books back then. Yeah. And it's like, now I get it. Like a lot of a lot of teenagers will like save up money and buy a car. And I'm like, I got 6 long boxes of X-Men comics, you know? Yeah. But anyway, so what I was really getting at is I do feel like there's a little bit of a tension with Kickstarter and trying to fund indie books, because it takes a lot for me to feel like to support a single issue on Kickstarter. Like on a personal level, I want to support a graphic novel because I want a complete story. Right. And I don't mean, again, I'm not calling out anybody specifically. And this actually has nothing to do with Final Street. I have several copies of books that were like issue 1 of a series that got funded, and then they just kind of never went anywhere for a variety of different reasons. And that's what's partially what's kind of kept me off of Kickstarter, because I do feel like this anxiety of like, I don't know if there are people out there like me that don't want to support single issues or first issues or what have you. And the lesson I learned was I spent 5 years putting together a graphic novel, and I barely was able to scrape together $2,000 on Kickstarter for the graphic novel. So maybe more people are, it's easier to get people to support a smaller cost book.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Or maybe it's just, I'm just terrible at networking. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like I am that. That's like, I can identify with that as well.
Yeah.
But
like when you look at books, like when you look at stuff to support, like how do you feel on feel about that, of like supporting a single issue versus a graphic novel?
Interestingly enough, I can probably count on 2 hands the number of campaigns that I've like followed after like issue 1 or 2.
Yeah.
That I've kept with it. Like, you know, there's a few, but not a lot. Like I'll pick up first issue just because, like, you know, it's cheap, and if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. So I don't know. I do a lot of shopping on Kickstarter.
Yeah. But, I get that. Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I also agree. I would prefer a trade if it's something that I want, you know. And honestly, it might even be because I don't want to have to try to keep up with 3 more Kickstarters.
Well, that's actually part of it, because like I've been doing cons for almost 10 years now. I did books for a few years before I actually went to a comic book convention. But it's like, I think about all the people that I met at one con that bought 1 issue from me. And I'm like, it's garbage to them. Like, I don't even care if they liked it. It's not a complete story. Like, they read it and was like, that's neat. And then they're never going to think about it again because it's not the full thing.
Right.
Whereas like a nice trade paperback, if they buy that from you, you meet them once, that's something that conceivably they would have and be able to put on a shelf and be like, oh, that's that book, the full book that I got, you know.
It's that story.
It's the story. Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking at it from the perspective of it being a story, not like a single issue product.
Yeah.
That's something that just like, it's probably the thing I think about the most when it comes to producing comics.
Yeah, no. And I have thought from that, like the producing the comics point of view, that like, just, I don't know why also I'm going to print all those floppies, you know, like, like I like printing the trade is just so much more attractive just from like, you know, like your printing and your costs and all that stuff. Like, I mean, I think like I love the floppy, but I don't know, just it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for people like us to like do them, you know, like unless you're an independent who can move crazy books, like more power on you, but that's not me, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a tricky line to walk.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody actually has the answers, because I don't think there's a perfect solution out there, which is one of the most frustrating things about comic books, both as like the actual large industry and then also just on an indie level. Comics is such a weird industry where it's like people make it happen however they can make it happen, but that doesn't work for everybody.
Right. Know? Yeah, I think it went from like an industry that started out with probably like the most like standard like practices, and like it's just you know, just gone out from there, and like,
it's frayed.
It just doesn't look anything like it used to. Like, and even in like the 10-year span, like when we started and what it looks like now, like it's a completely different landscape, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, that's actually in doing this podcast, I've talked to several people and how they like fund their books, and, you know, it's using Kickstarter. And that is one thing I've noticed, which I feel sort of stupid for not realizing this was the way it's going to be. And this goes back to me being in like the wrong place in the wrong time and not having foresight. Like, but it does feel like in many ways Kickstarter is now fulfilling the role that Diamond used to be, which is because like the conventional wisdom, because I remember people would talk like, what's the point of doing a mini series? You're going to spend all this money printing issues, just print the graphic novel. It'll be cheaper and you can get the book out there. And the idea was well, if you print a graphic novel, it's going to be in one issue of Diamond, and then it'll be, you know, comic book stores will order however much they think they can sell, and then that's it.
And they'll never order it again.
They'll never order it ever again. Whereas if you do your miniseries, if you do your 5-issue series, it's in Diamond for 5 months. Issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then your graphic novel 6. So now you have 6 months of advertising time where you'll build up to the graphic novel. And now, of course, that's, you know, since Diamond is dead, there's no point in trying to do that. But I see people using Kickstarter to that same degree. Because you do your Kickstarter for issue 1, you get enough attention on it, and then you do Kickstarter for issue 2, and that just kind of, you just build on that. And with each one, ideally, of course, you're making a good book that people want to read, you know, that they're coming back for. Like, it's a little, you know, we're just taking that as a given that what you're making is good enough that people want to come back for it. But that's a whole different argument of like trying to like discuss the creative process of making something that people respond to, because there's the thing that you want to do, and then there's, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean other people get it or, you know, like it, you know. Right.
No, I think that I feel like I have a Jekyll and Hyde case in my books, Northern Steele and Final Street, because like honestly, I think Final Street is probably the most broad appeal book that I could ever conceive of.
I love the idea of it. I was actually very jealous of the idea. I was like, that's such a perfect idea, because I love beat 'em up games. We haven't really said the premise of Final Street, but
I'm terrible. See, this is how bad. Even talking one-on-one on a podcast, I can't even talk about my own books in an effective manner.
You're preaching to the choir here. But if you want to do a quick elevator pitch or an explanation of Final Street, because I thought, I was like, man, what a great idea. I wish I would have. And it's not like it's the most unthought of idea, but it's just done perfectly well, you know.
Right. And like that was like, so the book is a retro beat 'em up video game in a comic book format. Basically we just you know, it's funny, it came from the idea that I was like got into retro gaming big again. Like, well, I guess when retro gaming became retro gaming, like I still had all the games, you know, from when I was a kid, and I was still playing them.
I still got my Super Nintendo hooked up to my TV. You know,
there you go, man. So like, being my favorite genre, I was just like playing a lot of those games and like trying to think of new, like always that new comic book idea thing, and not just the beat 'em up, but so many of these game stories, like their stories are literally one line, like someone's kidnapped, you have to save them. And I was like, you know, I get so like tired of trying to think of like a really good like comic idea, something that's gonna get people's attention, and like like I'm jealous of these video games that just had the dumbest, most simplest story, and you just like designed cool characters and gave them fun stuff to do, and that's your entertainment, you know? So like I just was like, it was an epiphany. I was like, I could just adapt that straight to a comic book, you know, like take the most outwardly recognizable things about a beat 'em up. So, you know, just, you know, fighting and the locales and, you know, weapons and like eating food for health and stuff like that. Like just take that and you can just put it on the page and think of how that would work, you know? So, so like, like I just thought of the idea, and one day I was at a signing with Brian, and I don't know what we were signing because I don't think either of us had anything new. So I don't know why we were there, but we were there. And like I just mentioned the idea to him, and we'd been looking for something to collaborate on for like years. And he was just like, yeah, like I want to draw that book. So we just started going after it from there. So
that's always exciting, that creative moment when like you and an artist can vibe on something, you know.
We were like at this little deli next to the comic shop, you know. We just went and had lunch, and so we're just like shooting the shit about this idea, like, so you know, it's one of those like things you'll always remember, like where you were when you thought of the idea.
Totally. So. It's always such a like it almost feels what's what I'm thinking of? Like the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, when you can
Yeah.
like pitch an idea and an artist is like, that's an awesome idea.
Yeah. You're
Because
like,
like,
whoa!
yeah, exactly. Because like you spend so much time thinking like, oh, I've got this idea. Who can I pitch this to?
Yeah.
Like, who would be good to draw this? And then there's that like weird, I don't want to say weird, but there's that professional awkward interactions that you have at comic conventions when you're talking to artists and trying to feel them out. Like, so what kind of stuff do you like? I like your art, you know.
Yeah.
But you don't want to come on too strong and be like, I got the perfect idea for you, and then they're just like, okay, back off, I'm busy.
Right. It sounds terrible, and I haven't even heard it.
Exactly. It's like I don't even care. You know, I don't want to. Yeah. But yeah, so that's always nice when you can just be chilling with somebody and just and I talked about this in my podcast with Buster Moody. Just like it's so good when you can just vibe with somebody on an idea. Because I don't know about you, I've worked on a few projects with somebody that was just like, I'm not even saying anybody specific, just like with artists that are just like, you know, I'm going to do my best, but it's a job,
right?
You know, and it's like they bring the art to the table, but it's totally different when you have somebody that's like invested in the idea.
Yeah, and it's just real easy to tell when you've got one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's one of those weird things too, because it's like it's so hard to like, I don't blame an artist. If it's a job and you're getting paid and do your best, you know, I get it. But it's also one of those weird I'm going to try and like take the artist perspective for a second and be like devil's advocate, where there are a lot of what I will refer to as hack frauds who are like, you know, I've got the perfect idea for a book. It's going to become a multi-million-dollar franchise. All I need you to do is draw it, but I can't pay you a lot because I don't want somebody who's just going to show up and do the art. I want somebody who's invested, and you need to be as invested in this as I am. And it's like, well, I can't. Like, I'm not invested.
Right.
You know, like, you got to pay.
Literally
something.
Not possible.
Exactly. Like, right. So it's like, I get it. This isn't a total dog on artist session, you know.
Right. No, not at all.
You and I, we get it. You gotta empathize with the artist to a certain degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not all the way, but a certain degree.
Yeah. No, and like, you know, there's been times where I'm just like, why did you take this job? Like, I understand, like, yeah, you want the money, but like, you could have said no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
so, with Final Street, one other thing I was going to say was one thing I liked about the book is that it feels very artist driven, because as you said, it's a very visual concept, because video games themselves are very visual, and you know, there's not a deep. I'll be the first to criticize video games for their writing. I know there are people out there that say now all these new generation of video games have great writing. No, they don't. But you know, I'll argue that one. But the problem is I don't have like 90 hours to play this stupid game to get to the good part. I'm sorry. You know, like, it's either good or it's not. Yeah, I said my piece, but I appreciate a game with as long as it's a simple idea to move it along, and it's, you know, So yeah, it seems like a very artist visual focused book. I think, which is one thing I liked about it, because it just works. Comic books are a visual medium, you know.
Like, you know, like you know, it's basically like we just kind of like designed a game and just like slapped it onto a panel, you know. So
how many issues is it?
It's 2. 2 are complete. It's supposed to be 4.
Okay, but it's a 4-issue series. Sorry,
it's a 4-issue series, which sort of it was you know, we design them like stages each issue. So
again, you know, I like the synchronicity of that. I always like when issues can kind of line up like that.
Right, and like, you know, it's got the same sort of beats as like a regular story, but also like as a mini sort of video game, like, you know. So like the last issue, they'll fight the final boss, that kind of good stuff. Like, all those concepts just like really came naturally to the series. So like I really hope that we can get back to it. You know, it's one of those things where Brian wants to do it, but Brian's an extremely busy guy. Like, you know, and the artist is. Yeah, so,
artists are busy. Working artists especially.
Yeah,
they're busy. Yeah.
So, And Brian's one of those guys. He doesn't say no to very much.
Yeah.
Like he takes on like almost all work that comes to him. So.
Brian is one of the friendliest artists
Yeah.
I've ever met at a con, and I'm not being facetious. Like when you're
Right.
at a con and you like catch an artist at their booth, and they're just like worn out or working, and you can just kind of see them being like, like they're doing that like work face. I've never seen Brian not smiling. Like he's always smiling. He's such a great guy.
Yeah, I mean, like that, and honestly, there couldn't be two more ironic people to be at a booth together. Like he's sitting up there smiling, happiest dude, drawing.
Yeah, he shines. Yeah, when he's at the booth. Yeah,
and I'm just like, the comic speaks for itself.
Right.
Pick it up, read it. Either you want it or you don't. You already know. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get back to it. Like he wants to do it. I've got to knock out the next 2 scripts. But the thing is like I don't think we'll do another Kickstarter, at least for the next 2 issues. I think the last Kickstarter kind of drove us into the dirt, like just mentally.
Was it like did you fund it, or the second issue? Did it successfully fund?
Yeah, we funded it, and but there was just like
I know those.
Brian got a job for IDW that he just like had to take, he got an inking job on G.I. Joe with his brother. So
nice.
Yeah, amazing, right? Like, and I can't begrudge him any, it's
I know that's the tricky thing of like eyeballing artists and be like, you're really good, I want you to do my indie book, and they can only do it for so long before they find better paying gigs. Right.
before you you just kind of start sliding down the priority line.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. But
so, do you fund all of your books pretty much yourself, like out of pocket?
I do now. Basically, I've been funding Steele out of my pocket for 2 or 3 years now. So
okay.
Just like to get the line art finished and stuff, and I'll move on to the next steps, pay out of pocket. Like
yeah.
But other than that, all my books before that actually were Kickstarter, and then I've got another series, Hank Steiner, Monster Detective.
Oh, okay. I don't know that one.
That's let's see. Here's the first issue of that. I don't know if you can see it.
Okay, yeah.
But it's a Source Point Press book, and
very nice. Yeah.
It's got a nice little saga all of its own as well. So
well, maybe at the next con that we're at, we can swap stories.
Yeah.
Some of these behind the scenes sagas.
Yeah, because that one it's 3 issues in, and it's kind of on hiatus because the artist he's doing a book with Source Point Press that, man, I don't know the name, but it's like they got a license for some sort of tabletop RPG book. So he's been tapped for that, so he's got to do that instead. So
RPGs, man, they're like that's a growing industry, and it was already popular, but it's the place to be now.
I wouldn't be surprised to see it sort of like kind of creep up on comics, replace on Kickstarter.
Comics, yeah. That's a whole other podcast topic in and of itself, is just gaming, and it's, and in many ways I feel like a dinosaur, because I'm like, I like comic books, and people today, kids today, if they're not playing video games, they're doing tabletop gaming or card games, or it's like, I hate to be like a full-on grandpa, but like nobody reads anymore. No, like
it's true. Yeah, no, the comic is a hard sell, man, all the way around.
It is, yeah. But it's the good stuff is just so good.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, like, I can't stop buying them. Like, I've gotten into like, long box surfing for like dollar issues, and like I just keep finding so much awesome old stuff, and like there's so much cool small press stuff like that I started getting into, and yeah, man, it's just there's always more comics out there, man.
I know. Well, dude, we have been going for a little over an hour now. It is amazing how quickly time flies when you're complaining about comic books.
I told you, I warned you.
Hey, dude, like I said, it's pretty much the topic of this podcast in many ways, and it's certainly I actually feel bad the few times I've gotten to like meet up with other creators, and I'm like, I just like if I get cut loose, I'm just like, man, and then this happened, and now I'm doing this, and this artist, and I love this guy, but I'm so sick of him, and
right,
and it's like I feel bad, like I'll talk anybody out of ever doing comics or talking to, or even just like talking to me about comic books. Nobody wants to hear it. Yeah, but yeah, man. It was great to see you.
You too, man.
Because it's been so long, and I mean, because it's been a little while, because I haven't even been to Planet Comic Con the last few years that they did it before 2020, because I had to scale back the conventions I was doing, and Planet was really growing. It was the last year I did it, I think, was 2017, and it started to feel a little too much like a Wizard World for me. I still like the show, and that's not even like a total dig on Wizard World, because it has its value and it has its place. But I was also probably like the most debt I had ever been that year, like from making books, and I'm just like, I need to stop spending money and just and doing cons are fun, but they're not money makers.
They're not.
They like cost money.
They're an excuse to hang out with cool people,
right? Exactly.
And unfortunately, there's an entry fee. So.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, man. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me know when the Northern Steele trade is ready to go. Like, or we can just talk about G.I. Joe comics for all I care. Whatever.
Dude, that sounds great to me, man. But anybody can read Northern Steele for free. Actually,
that was where I was going to go next. Yes,
I have a Patreon. I think it's Patreon/Northern Steele. I think that's how that works.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the description for the video.
Okay, right on. You can read issues 1 all the way up to our current page, and it releases every Saturday morning if I manage. So
nice Saturday morning comics.
Yeah, dude. Yep.
I like it. Do you have any other social media presence that people can find you on?
I'm on Twitter, Pistol Whip Press. That's my handle, and I don't do a whole lot of promotion otherwise, and so.
That Twitter, complaining about Twitter will be a separate episode.
Yeah.
You've gone through the previous episodes I've done. I have plenty to say complaining about Twitter.
Yeah, no, I'm down for that too. I've got a long list.
Right. All right, man. Well, again, it's good to catch up with you. Everybody should definitely check out Scott's comics. They're really cool.
Right on. Thanks, man.
And yeah, we'll definitely do this again sometime. I'm sure the next time we're at a con together, we're gonna hang out.
Yep. Sounds good, man.
All right, man. I will see you then.
All right. Take it easy.
You too. Hey, everybody. Aaron Walther here, just reminding you that if you like this podcast, please subscribe to the channel. Also, head over to secondthoughtcomics.com to stay up to date on the various comics that I write. For a limited time, I'm giving away a free PDF of my latest graphic novel, The Amoral Stingray. All you have to do is sign up to the Second Thought Comics newsletter. Link is in the description. Thanks for reading.